I'm looking around the room, and I am impressed to see all of you who have turned out tonight to celebrate and honor a brother who has stepped out to create a space where we can learn, gain knowledge, and connect in community together. And for you to take time out of your busy schedule to be here on a Friday night, all the way Jayden Finch, is absolutely amazing. And I can assure you that you will not be disappointed. So thanks for coming out. Nonetheless, we are pleased to be able to set the stage for you to be blessed with someone who has demonstrated leadership and who's also demonstrating that not all of our young men are lost. But there are some of us, young men, who are on a journey to discover and to tap into the greatness that comes with being sons and daughters of African people. And so, without any further ado, I'd like you to put your hands together to welcome to the podium none other than Jayden Ogé-Maxwell, and he's not alone. Here's a man who makes sure that his son is standing beside him. And so put your hands together for Jayden Ogé-Maxwell and Judah.
Peace, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. I give thanks and I acknowledge all of your leadership for showing up for the community, showing up for Black history, and showing up for Toronto. First things first, I want to acknowledge Winston LaRose, who taught me before you address a crowd in any capacity, it is traditional in African culture to ask for permission before to the elders in the room before I formally begin speaking. So, Baba, may I speak? Thank you very much. I want to recite a poem that I heard recited by Anthony T. Browder that was created by his daughter, Atlantis Browder, both amazing elders and scholars in the community. And it is noted, it is called Transition 14. The poem goes like this. In the beginning, our ancestors knew not. They studied. For 4,000 years, they learned all there was to know. They even taught others. Then came the Maafa, a key Swahili term which means the great disaster, a point in which our history was effectively robbed from us. For 400 years, enslavers made it illegal for Africans to read or write. And after 400 years of forgetting, we have effectively forgotten that we have forgotten. That, ladies and gentlemen, changes today. For I, Jayden Ogé-Maxwell, studious scholar, up-and-coming public speaker and historian, equipped with the help of my community and the literature here tonight, will read for them. I will remember for them. I will write for them. I will teach for them. And through an endeavor and a commitment that's unwithering to my community, I will do my diligence in making sure that our ancestral heritage is never forgotten again. Give thanks. So on that note, I want you all to put your hands together for Mustafa, straight from Ghana, our professional drummer. acknowledge the works of giants in this room, such as Louis March. Now, a little backstory, last August I was at Afrofest, and although we've never been formally introduced, I recognized Louis March from being in this exact room back in 2017, as well as being a staple in the community and somebody who's contributed in a very phenomenal way. So I jumped in front of this beloved elder and I asked him for a moment of his time, and I introduced myself as an up-and-coming public speaker in the community. I pulled out some books and I told him what I'm about, and I told him that it's an opportunity of a lifetime to meet him. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge Louis March in this room.
Before I start, drumming. Whenever we start an event, whenever we do things in our community, drumming is a part of it. But before there was newspapers, before there was radios, telephones, cell phones, internet, before there was telegrams, we had the drums. And that's how we communicated as a people. When we look at the drum, I want people to understand that it's more than a drum. What has been sacrificed, in many cases, is a tree for the bass, animal skin for the layer. Something has given up its life so that we can drum. And people need to understand that it's more than just a dance instrument. It's more than just drumming. It's spiritual. Drumming taking place through Black History Month or other times throughout the year. Just think of what you're listening to. It's history. It's tradition. It's values. It's beliefs. It's what kept us together as a people before all the technology came. So please, give me a round of applause for the drum.
My name is Chidozie Okoye. I'll just give you a little summary of what my name means. So Chi means like the guy up there, or God, or energy, and Adozie just means fixing things. So
Francis here allowed me to come under his wing. He took the time to allow me to have a discussion with him, lay out my idea, and from that moment, which I believe was last April until now, I have gotten nothing but the most warmest welcoming and most unwithering, unconditional support from Francis. He is the founder and the director of the Canadian Multicultural Museum of Toronto. I don't have the exhibit up here today, but it's a phenomenal exhibit in which people of all genders, races, creeds, and particularly those of the African diaspora can once again go through a multicultural museum and view the historical contributions to the community. I've taken my son and my daughter to the exhibit myself, and it's phenomenal. So we have Francis Jeffers in the building. I want to give him an opportunity to acknowledge you, and I also want to give him his flowers and have a round of applause for Francis, people. Just a short word. Thank you.
Good evening, brothers and sisters. Come on, share some love. Share some love. It's a great month. It's a time to honor the ancestors and those who've gone before, and those who showed us that we stand on, and we continue, and not just this month, but whatever time.
Thank you for all coming. We are very happy that you could come. And as you know, my name is Judah, and I am his son, and I am here to enjoy the presentation today.
The birth and development of Hue-Manity. Okay? Let's get right into it. We've wasted enough time. Slide 1. Dr. John Henrik Clarke was a college professor, internationally respected historian, writer, poet, lecturer, and considered by most to be the father of Black studies. On behalf of Toronto, Ontario, the Jamaican Canadian Association, may we please, before we begin, take a moment to honor him for his years of service, providing us with the compass that we need to regain our spiritual, economical, and political and cultural direction. Dr. John Henrik Clarke, everyone. One of his most famous quotes that I love quoting is read here. History is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. It is a compass they can use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It is the role of history to tell a people where they have been, where they are, and what they are. But most importantly, it is the role of history to tell a people where they still must go and what they still must be. So Toronto, Ontario, ladies and gentlemen, family, I pose a question to you all. Where are we right now? Who are we? And what are we in the midst of doing? What are we in the midst of creating? Moving forward. Carter G. Woodson, 100 years later, a tribute to Carter G. Woodson. Now, for those of you who don't know, it was back in 1926 that Carter G. Woodson, a graduate of history from Harvard University, founded what was originally Negro History Week to encourage blacks to be proud of their heritage. Now, I'm the first to always say that, well, two things first are significant, that in 2 years, it will be exactly 100 years, a full century, since the beginning of Negro History Week. We're coming up on an amazing time. Another thing about Negro History Week / Black History Month / African Heritage Month is that I always want to acknowledge that it's amazing to be able to speak about the freedom fighters of, the post-transatlantic slave trade and whatnot, big up Rosa Parks and big up all the freedom fighters. However, I think that we often lose sight that the initial intention of Negro History Week was not to regurgitate history that we are always told. It is to revive long lost, forgotten history and to celebrate aspects of black culture that has been forgotten as a result of the Ma'afa. So I want to acknowledge Carter G. Woodson. Pan-Africanism and an African-centered education. Now, what exactly is a Pan-African, or Pan-Africanism for that matter? As quoted by the Prince of Pan-Africanism himself, Mr. King Kong Consciousness, Dr. Umar Johnson, to be a Pan-African is to be an advocate for and recognize the need for socio-economical and political harmony amongst all peoples of African and Caribbean descent. Pan-Africanism is also a movement of solidarity amongst people of African and Caribbean descent to recover or reclaim history, culture, and national pride. It is the embodiment of Peter Tosh's lyrics, "As long as you're a black man, you're an African." Although Marcus Garvey is typically recognized as the face of Pan-Africanism, it should be acknowledged that Marcus Garvey is on record giving credit to Edward W. Blyden as being one of his main influences towards globally organizing people of African descent. Edward W. Blyden, although not spoken of much, can be viewed as the founding father of Pan-Africanism by challenging arguments about black inferiority within literature produced by him in between the years 1856 and 1857. Blyden was recognized by Dr. John Henry Clark as being a man so far ahead of his time that we still haven't caught up to him yet. This information has come out of Sean Libbert's Awaken the Mind, page 88. Part 1, the origin of humanity. Now, in each of these parts, these segments, I'm going to make a point to give a tribute and acknowledgement to the ancestor that I took the most influence from into coming into this knowledge. And for this particular segment, the origin of humanity, it is a tribute to Dr. Benjamin Yosef Ben Yunakinan, because after reading his publication, African Mother of Western Civilization, which I encourage you all to pick up for yourselves, I have now officially gotten a concept and gotten an understanding of how deep humanity goes, taking it back to the first tool-making men of Kenya, taking them back to the first erect men of Tanzania. So here we go. What is a human? Biologists classify an organism into species. Animals are said to belong to the same species if they tend to mate with each other. Species that evolve from a common ancestor are bunched together under the heading genus. Lions, tigers, leopards, and jaguars are variations of different species within the same genus, called Panthera. Everybody in attendance at this lecture falls under the classification of Homo sapien. Sapien meaning wise, Homo meaning man. Now, we're all mature here. I'm not going to say pause even once. This is not something to laugh about. Let's take some gems away, okay? Sapien meaning wise, Homo meaning man. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, the same way all cats come from the smallest domestic house cat to the most ferocious lion, share a common ancestor who lived upwards of 25 million years ago. We modern-day humans can trace our lineage to a common ancestor who sprang out of Central Africa and East Africa upwards of 2.5 million to 4.6 million years ago. These ancestors are known today as the Australopithecines. This information was taken out of Sapiens, page 5 and 6. Now, once again, I am all for giving my own hypothesis. I am also giving my own thesis, but when I am extracting information from source literature, you will hear it from me. This is not my information. You'll also hear me say, these are not my personal opinions. This is documented history. Okay? Moving forward. So over here we see the emergence of man. Okay, at the beginning here, you see, as I mentioned, the Australopithecus, whose first bones you can find. The first form of Australopithecus is something that's known as Australopithecus ramidus, and that dates back to approximately 4.6 million years old. After the Australopithecines, you find the first tool-making men, or men of ability, known as Homo habilis, who we will speak about in a few slides, coming out of the Olduvai Gorge of Kenya. After the Homo habilis, you find Homo erectus, or erect man, who you find who actually ventured out of Africa and populated the rest of the world. We will talk about this very shortly. The hominid family tree. What we are going to attempt to do here is to follow the birth and development of humanity, which began in the Great Lakes regions of Central and East Africa, and follow it through an extraordinarily long process of migrations into new climates and adaptations to new environments. As we explore all of the following stages of humanity, I'd like to remind us all that we descend from a common ancestor and belong to the same species of family or genus called Homo, and that regardless of where we find humans, we are all of the same family tree. So when we look down here, as I said, if you look at the beginning of the tree, the Australopithecines, which is the Australopithecus robustus, gracile, and ramidus, dates back to between 5 million to 2 million years old. Now, as Booker T. Coleman, Professor Kaba Kamene always says, you have to be very mindful that when you're giving these dates, you have to give some leeway. Even when you're radiocarbon dating, you have to give 100 years, take 100 years. So by all means, if someone else finds a more accurate date, chime in. You know, I'm not the smart, I'm always willing to learn. I'm always very coachable. So, key points. Through an extensive process of global migrations and the gradual adaptation to new climates, our hominid ancestors went through various stages of development. At the stage of Homo erectus, erect man, humanity began traveling outside of Africa and began peopling the rest of the world. Humans, which were born around the Great Lake regions near all the equator, were all black and necessarily pigmented. Now, there is a law by the name of Glosure Law, which states that warm-blooded animals by nature must be pigmented in a hot and humid climate. So by that means where the first fossils and fossil men and the first signs and symbols of primordial man occurred in the central regions of central and eastern regions of Africa, by law and by nature, these individuals must have been pigmented and hue men and women. This information was taken out of Africa, Mother of Western Civilization, page 38, and Genesis and Exodus, page 27. All right, the Australopithecines. In the second chapter of the book of Genesis, we read that a river which watered the Garden of Eden flowed outwards and formed 4 separate headwaters named Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates, all of which are located in the northeastern quadrants of Africa, which are now referred to as the Middle East, or Western Asia. However, due to the archaeological discoveries of the 20th century, we can now say with a degree of certainty that man in his most ancient form was birthed out of the Great Lake regions of Central and East Africa upwards of 6,000 kilometers south of those regions of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. Ancient bones found in the heart of Africa have been assembled into a skull that may extend man's immediate ancestry back more than 1 million years earlier than previously believed. There is now clear evidence that in Eastern Africa, a large-brained, truly upright and bipedal, meaning walking on 2 legs, form of genus existed more than 2.5 million years ago. Now, this is the skull of what I believe was Australopithecus robustus. Now, from the existence of the Australopithecines during the Pleistocene epoch, more than 2 million years ago until the first anatomically modern man from Homo Ethiopia, over 100,000 years ago, the complete hominid family tree can only be found on the continent of Africa. You will find Homo erectus in Asia, you will find Cro-Magnon man in Europe, but you will only find from the Australopithecines all the way up until Homo sapiens sapiens, 50,000 years ago, will only be found on the continent of Africa. New York Times published an article on November 10, 1972 by Walter Sullivan, which highlighted the discovery of the fragmented skull of the Australopithecus robustus, which was found in a desert region on the east side of Lake Rudolph. According to Dr. J. Desmond Clark, professor of anthropology at University of California at Berkeley, This skull was found in a layer of volcanic ash upwards of 2.6 million years old. Now, I very much enjoy including people's credentials, including where they studied, including their scholarly background when making statements of this nature, because what's significant is we are no longer on the streets of Harlem hearing this information from Hotep brothers. We are in a scholarly environment reaping the information that is hidden from us intentionally by people who are the most trained, the most well-studied brains on this matter, okay? Australopithecus robustus. Moving on. Now, and as many times as I can, I make a point to go on my phone, screenshot what we're looking at, and give you a spatial awareness of what we're talking about. So this is Lake Rudolph, okay? Keep in mind that is by Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and South Sudan, okay? Central East Africa, Lake Rudolph, okay? And right now, modern day, it has been renamed to Lake Turkana, just like, they renamed Lake Nyanza after the monarch of Victoria. I assure you, millions of years ago, there was no Victorias in Central Africa. I'll tell you that much right now. Moving forward. All right, Australopithecus gracile, very short and concise. Discovered in 1924 in South Africa. Its classification is a part of the Australopithecine families, and its age is 2.1 million years old. Okay. Existing more than 2.1 million years ago, the Australopithecus gracile played a more significant role in the hominid evolution than their robustus forms did. This fossil was discovered during the year 1924 inside a set of limestone caves called Sterkfontein in South Africa, about 40 kilometers northwest of Johannesburg. Although anatomically this fossil man shows extraordinarily close resemblance to modern man, he would not become widely accepted as a member of our hominid family tree until the middle of the 20th century, due to most believing that humans evolved outside of Africa. Okay? The term gracile means slender and denotes the smaller proportion jaw, teeth, and skull than that of their robustus counterpart or robust counterpart. Most experts now regard the Australopithecus gracile as the last form of Australopithecine in existence before evolution gave rise to that of modern man. Okay? Moving forward, here we go as a visual of Sterkfontein Cave in South Africa. Very spooky. Looks like a scene out of Lord of the Rings. I'd rather not be in there. Okay, moving forward. Once again, Sterkfontein, close to Botswana, close to Zimbabwe, close to Mozambique, and as you can see, these are modern day tourists going up and down in the caves. Very evident that somebody knows something that we don't. National Geographic is in all these places where they would suggest that nothing of importance was happening. Real quick, I want to acknowledge that there is a theory, a dogmatic theory by the name known as the Hamitic hypothesis, which suggests that the only things of significance that are found on the African continent are a result of the contributions from Hamites, who are descendants of Noah, so descendants of Caucasians, in a submission to try to suggest that nothing that these Africans south of the Saharas, or the Hottentots, or the Bushmen, or the Abantu contributed nothing. So who was it that was in Botswana and Lesotho and Zimbabwe? Okay, moving on. Pithecanthropus rudolfensis. I encourage you guys to try and keep up with me. These are some new words for me, I tell you. Discovered in 1972 near Lake Rudolph in Kenya. Its classification is a Homo habilis, tool-making man, and it's aged to about 2 million years ago. The left picture here is from the Natural Museum of London, and the right we have a depiction from the Western Australian Museum. And its official code is KNM-ER 1470, the cranium. Now, meet Pithecanthropus rudolfensis, or Homo rudolfensis as for short. The fossilized skull of this ancient ancestor was discovered in the year 1972 by a team led by Richard Leakey, the son of the paleontological dynamic duo Louis Leakey and Mary Leakey. It should not be seen as a coincidence that this fossil man was discovered in the exact same regions as our more ancient friend Australopithecus robustus off of the shores of Lake Rudolph in Kenya. Although at one point considered a member of the Australopithecines, Homo rudolfensis appeared to be equipped with a larger than normal brain casing, longer face and jaws not quite as heavy built as that of the Australopithecines, which indicates a different diet. It is presumed that the Homo rudolfensis used stone tools to process their food because more than one species of early human lived at the time of tool manufacture and was used to originate. It's hard for scientists to be certain which species is responsible for the making and using of the first stone tools because more than one species of early human lived at the time of tool manufacture and originated. It's hard for scientists to be certain, oh, my apologies. So this is information coming out of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in regards to the Pithecanthropus rudolfensis, or Homo rudolfensis. Okay, this is my favorite. Say it with me, Zinjanthropus boissei. Over time, Zinjanthropus boissei. Perfect. Zinjanthropus boissei was discovered on July 17th of 1959 in Tanzania. Its classification is a Homo habilis, tool-making man or man of ability, and its age to approximately 1.75 million years old. Now, this particular fossil man was dated by, I believe, the University of California using the potassium-argon dating method. Don't quote me on it, look it up yourselves, but I believe once you're past dating something around 250,000 years old, using the method of radiocarbon dating no longer becomes the most accurate, and you gotta transfer over to potassium-argon dating. Zinjanthropus boissei was dated via these means. Now, as the Australopithecines developed in the central regions of Africa and they began to spread from the forests of equatorial Africa into new wide open plains, their new environmental conditions forced them to assume and adopt an erect posture and now begin to incorporate the use of stone tools in their everyday life. Although these were not tools as we know them today, although these are not tools as we know them today, they still serve the same purpose: survival, the ability to hunt, to make fire, to make clothing, to make housing, and finally to secure the comfort and pleasure. The Olduvai Gorge of Tanzania would first begin to attract the world's attention in the year 1913 when a German geologist by the name of Dr. Hans Reck discovered a skeleton inside the gorge. 19 years later, the famed paleontologist Dr. Louis Leakey would travel to the gorge and would end up discovering even more skeletal remains. From here on, it was a field day. The archaeologists and anthropologists of the most significant finds of them all would come 27 years later on the 17th of July, 1959, while digging on the slopes of Bed 1 of the Olduvai Gorge at the site known as FLK. Dr. Leakey unearthed the link between man as we know him today and the prehistoric ancestor which existed over 1 million years ago existed over 1 million years prior to the myth of a Garden of Eden and the creation of Adam. This hominid would become known as Zinjanthropus boissei. This information is taken out of pages 45 to 48 of Africa, Mother of Western Civilization. So over here you see a few important things. This was documented back in the New York Times in August 24th, 1959, and again on July 23rd, 1969 by the New York Times attesting that they found a fossil man which dates more than 1,750,000 years old. Don't take it up with me. These are not my opinions. This is history, okay? Now, these are some examples of fossil tools. You see a tool here used with a flat side and a point to juke something. You see they were using flexible tree limbs as a bow and arrow, and you see that there's depictions of dancers and tapered and pointed coarse arrowhead to take down big games. Back then, the animals were a lot bigger. Okay. So once again, and over here, when you talk about these things, the first thing that the zealots and the first thing that people who are, suffer from cognitive dissonance would suggest is, oh, those are apes, those are monkeys. No, they're not humans, they're monkeys. Now, once again, when you look at the palate of Zinjanthropus boissei and you relate it to your own palate, you ask yourself, how much different from modern men are the jaws of these ancient tool-making men of ability? These are pictures that I think are significant enough to share with you. And here they are. Moving on. Here we go. This is a depiction, this is a representation of where exactly the Olduvai Gorge of Kenya is, right beside Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. Now, these are going to be that's a very significant, extraordinarily significant part of the continent, and we're going to get exactly into why that is. But just keep in mind where these fossil men are popping up: Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. Okay, moving on. Pithecanthropus erectus, also known as Java man, discovered in 1892 in Java, Indonesia. Its classification is a member of the Homo erectus species, and it's about 1.2 million years old. Okay, Now, upwards of 1.2 to 2 million years ago, humanity journeyed out of Africa and began a process of settling throughout vast areas of North Africa, Europe, and Asia. Since survival in the snowy regions of northern Europe required different traits than those needed to stay alive in the steaming jungles of Indonesia, humanity evolved in ways that were unique to their given surroundings and circumstances. Now, humans that were in Europe and Western Asia evolved into what we know today as Homo neanderthalis, which you will see on the right. That is how the individuals who migrated into those regions of Europe and Western Asia evolved into, say, pigmented men, but now with straight hair. You don't need kinky peppercorn pigmented hair and kinky hair in those regions. Now, Homo neanderthalis meaning man from Neanderthal. These Neanderthals tended to be bulkier, more muscular, and well adapted to the cold climate of the Ice Age than Western Asia. The more eastern regions of Asia were populated by Homo erectus, or upright man, who survived there for upwards of 2 million years, making it one of the most durable human species ever. It was in between the years 1891 and 1892 that on the island of Java in Indonesia, that an excavation team led by Dutch-born paleontologist Eugene Dubois discovered a toothed, thigh bone, and skull cap of Pithecanthropus erectus, more commonly known as Java man. It should be noted that according to a man by the name of Dr. Thomas, PhD in paleobiochemistry, the present-day Australoids found in Australia can be related to Pithecanthropus of Java by the Ngandong men of Java about 150,000 years ago. Okay, this information is coming out of Civilization or Barbarism by Sheikh Anta Diop, as well as Sapiens. So, once again, Homo rudolfensis out of East Africa evolved in that nature. Homo erectus, who migrated into East Asia, evolved in that nature. And Homo neanderthalis, who migrated into Europe and Western Asia, where we find Grimaldi man, who we'll be speaking about in the second portion of this lecture, evolved in that matter. All members of humanity, all pigmented humans, evolving in different areas of the world under different circumstances. Moving on. Here we go. This is a depiction out of Java, Indonesia. So this is where Java man, Homo erectus Java man came. Homo erectus. What was Java man's name again? Yeah, Pithecanthropus erectus. Work with me, people. All right. Moving on. So this is where this is Java, Indonesia. Moving on. Homo heidelbergensis. You can't make this stuff up. Discovered in 1907 in Heidelberg, Germany. Its classification is a member of the Homo erectus family, and it is approximately 650,000 years old. Now, just about 15 years after the discovery of Java man on the shores of Indonesia, and approximately 14,500 kilometers west into the land of Europe, we find another fossil man. The jaw of this ancient human ancestor was discovered in the year 1907 by a man named Daniel Hartmann in a sand quarry in the community of Mauer, about 10 kilometers southeast of Heidelberg, Germany. This mandible was nearly complete except for the missing premolars and first two left molars. It is heavily built and lacks a chin. A German scientist named Otto Schoensack was the first to describe the specimen and proposed the species name Homo heidelbergensis. This information is coming out of the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. What a job. Big game hunting. Now, Homo heidelbergensis was also the first hunter of large game animals. Remains of animals such as wild deer, horses, elephants, hippos, and rhinos with butchery marks on their bones have been found together at sites with Homo heidelbergensis fossil. Evidence for this also comes from 400,000-year-old wooden spears found at the site of Schoningen, Germany, which were found together with stone tools and the remains of more than 10 butchered horses. You have your source at the bottom there, folks. And that is a cave drawing of some really good fun big game hunting in ancient Germany. Moving on. Heidelberg, Germany. This is what it looks like modern day, and this is where it is. So right over here, what you see that theoretically speaking, If an individual wanted to journey right out of the Strait of Gibraltar there, you're going to end up in Spain. And if you keep walking over a few centuries, where would you end up? In Germany? I don't know. You tell me. That's where the bone was found. Heidelberg, Germany. Homo erectus pekinensis, also known as pecking man, discovered in 1921 in Zhukoodian cave in China. This is a classification of Homo erectus as well, just about 100,000 years younger than the fossil man found in Germany, at 530 years old approximately. Pecking man was an extinct species of Homo erectus known from the fossils found at Zhukoodian near Beijing. Pecking man was identified as a member of the human lineage by a man named Davidson Black in 1927 on the basis of a single tooth. Later excavations brought forth several skull caps and mandibles, facial limbs, facial and limb bones, and the teeth of about 40 individuals. Evidence suggests that the Zhukoodian fossils date between 770,000 and 220,000 years old. Research shows that we were able to more confidently settle at an age of about 530,000 years. Pecking man is characterized by a cranial capacity averaging about 1,000 cubic centimeters, though some individual skull capacities approached 1,300 cubic centimeters, nearly the size of modern man's. Pecking man had a skull that was a flattened profile with a small forehead, keel along the top of the head for attachment of powerful jaw muscles, very thick skull bones, heavy brow ridges, and the occipital torus of a large palate and a large chinless jaw. The teeth are essentially modern, though canines and molars are quite large, and the enamel of the molars are often wrinkled. The limb bones are indistinguishable from those of modern humans. The original fossils were under study at Peking Union Medical College in 1941 with Japanese invasion imminent, an attempt was made to smuggle them out of China to the United States. The bones appear to have never been recovered, leaving only plaster casts for study. Renewed excavation in the caves beginning in the year 1958 brought a new specimen to light. In addition to the fossils, core tools and primitive flake tools were found. This is coming from the Britannica in regards to the pecking man of ancient China. All right, and this is a depiction of what modern-day Zhukoodian cave in China looks like, and there it is, just on the border of northeast China, right near South Korea and Mongolia. Okay? All right, things are gonna get interesting now. Dawn of the Homo sapiens and the Omo River. Now, this fossil man was discovered in 1967 by Omo, Ethiopia. Its classification is, as we are now, a Homo sapien, and is aged at about 150,000 years old. Now, food for thought, back in, I believe, the 15th century, around 1546, there was an archbishop by the name of an esteemed historian, theologian, Christian, and very wise man by the name of Bishop James Ussher. Now, Bishop James Ussher, in studying the chronology and the instances of significance and the births and anything significant that happened through the chronology of the Bible, his intention was to be able to solidify and find out what date creation would have taken place. By studying the Bible vigorously over many of years, he published a piece of work known as the Annals of the Old Testament. In the Annals of the Old Testament, it is suggested that the date of creation would have began on October 23rd, 4004 BCE, before the Common Era. I want to put that into perspective because we are looking at the birth and development of humanity in Ethiopia as modern men 150,000 years ago. Riddle me that. Okay, moving on. So, we've managed to highlight the birth and development of humanity with the introduction of the Australopithecines more than 2.6 million years in the past, and now we followed the historical record all the way to our own doorstep. Welcome home, ladies and gentlemen, to the dawn of the Homo sapiens. When searching for the origin of modern man, we find ourselves examining a group of people who the scientific community refer to as diminutive Africoids. Let's try it together, people. Diminutive Africoids. One more time. Diminutive Africoids. Okay? Dominion of Africa. Okay, upwards of 100,000 years ago. These ancestors traveled northwards with the course of the Nile River and effectively migrated out of Africa, primarily by way of the Strait of Gibraltar. Now, this is a screenshot of my own computer, okay? Not my opinion. So primarily they migrated out of the Strait of Gibraltar, which is a narrow strait that connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea and separates Europe from Africa. The two continents are separated by a merely 13 kilometers of ocean at the strait's narrow point. Now keep in mind, 100,000 years ago, who knows where the sea would have been? Might have been a lot less high. It may have been a hop, skip, and a jump from Morocco to Spain. Who knows? So they primarily migrated out of there, Northwest Africa, as well as the Isthmus of Suez, which is Northeast Africa. The Isthmus of Suez is a 125-kilometer wide land bridge that lies between the Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea, east of the Suez Canal. Now, the boundary between the continents of Africa and Asia to the south is the Gulf of Suez, dividing the mainland of Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula. Now, fun fact, it is said when we study anthropology unbiasedly that the whole of the Arabian Peninsula and the Arabia Felix, or Western Asia, was populated predominantly by a pigmented Kushite race all the way from the birth of humanity over 100,000 years ago up until the 18th century before the Common Era, which is right before you start having Abraham migrating out of the Ur of Chaldees into the land of Canaan. Now, interesting enough, that is what you're looking at being the land of Canaan, where the first Canaanites were said to be those who were known as the Natufians, who existed there during the Mesolithic era over 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. All right, now some fun facts. These early humanoids are commonly described around the world with possessing many of the same physical characteristics, such as an unusually short stature, strongly projected brow arches, low brows, flat noses, bulging nostrils, and prognathism, which is a bulging jawbone, as well as a dark skin complexion. These are who you would refer to as the Twa Umbuti, or the Bushmen, or the Hottentots. And these are the individuals that you would find in modern-day Congo, but back in the day, they were scattered all throughout Central and South Africa. The information that you're finding here is coming straight out of Albert Churchward's Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man, as well as that illustration you're seeing right there. Phenomenal piece of literature. I suggest you all tap in. Moving on. Okay, so when these diminutive Africoids migrated out of Northwest Africa, as well as Northeast Africa, they started popping up all over the world as young black women in the Andaman Islands. If you didn't know any better, you would think that this woman is from Ghana. She's actually from off the southeast coast of India. Middle center, those are who are known as the Aita, or the Negritos, or the Agta of the Philippines. Dark pigmented, natty hair women. And all over, they might be from Papua New Guinea. They might be from Australia as the first Australoids. So I want to put things into perspective that regardless of where you are seeing these individuals, they all are going to share the same common characteristics. Some people refer to them as black dwarfs. Some people refer to them misnomer and derogatorily as pygmies. Who you are looking at are the descendants of the first diminutive Africoids and the first modern men and women. Now, we began to know these people around the world from all sorts of names, which they are derogatorily insulted as I mentioned. They are derogatorily named pygmies, negritos, negrilos, Aita, Sakai, black dwarfs, Hottentots, Bushmen. All of these, more than likely, are a derogatory term. But you know, when you hear these terms, this is who we're talking about. Okay, so this is the regions of the Omo River. You know, right to the west of Ethiopia, to the east of South Sudan. Now, as I mentioned, in this illustration here, out of Sapiens, you see that from the central regions of Africa, you're able to go northwest, northeast, and effectively cross into Western Asia, go into Southeast Asia, and continue right into Siberia. We'll go into that later. Significance of the Omo River, a tribute to Booker T. Coleman, aka Professor Kaba Kamene. Now, when watching a lecture from Booker T. Coleman, he really highlighted the significance of the Omo River, and I want to do him justice, and I want to big up this elder who is still going hard, still teaching about Black history right now. And what he had mentioned is that the Omo River is significant because when you look at it, it is just as the Nile Valley, it is a cultural highway. We spoke about how Homo rudolfensis and the first fossil men and the first tool-making men originated from Lake Rudolph, Lake Turkana, and Kenya. Okay, so now should we see this as a random act of coincidence that a river which connects that same body of water called the Omo River travels right up into the Omo Valley of Ethiopia? Can we imagine the kind of commerce and communication and dialogue and trade that was going on way back when, hundreds of thousands of years ago, with a river system connecting the place of the most ancient fossil men to the home of the most modern, anatomically modern men? Now, why it's significant is Booker T. Coleman, I heard him in a lecture say that when it is said and it is written that in regards to the Omo River, the chaotic potential matter of energy and all of the combustion of everything amazing in those forests and regions of Central Africa actually gave out a sound. And what that sound was, when you were around it, it was said that you would hear the Omo River speak to you, and it would speak as though you would hear, oh. Picture the body of water, the ancient feminine nature, the body of water coursing through Kenya and Ethiopia. Homo. Homo sapien idaltu, Herto man, discovered in 1997 in the Afar Triangle of Ethiopia. Homo sapien, about 155,000 years ago. In regard to the origin of these ancient people, we can now say with a degree of certainty that a solid foundation of recent scientific studies conducted by a team of 11 scholars, most of them based at Oxford University, that the earliest fossils of anatomically modern man, Homo sapiens, come from the Omo Valley of Ethiopia, Africa. The data uncovered shows that these ancient people were presented in Central and South Africa more than 100,000 years ago. The data found shows that modern man was born in Africa, and then a founder population migrated out of the continent and gave rise to all non-African people. This information is coming out of Runoko Rashidi's publication, The African Star Over Asia, pages 179 and 180. Runoko Rashidi. Okay? Now, prior to the rapid expansion of our species, the Earth was being populated by a race of people known as Homo sapien idaltu, aka Herto man. Now I like Herto man because he looks like all of it. He looks like our uncle. Like, this is Uncle Fred right here. You know, I know this guy. I've seen him at Dundas Square, Sankofa Square, and this is the most modern direct ancestor. But he existed over 100,000 years prior to the suggested date of creation. What is the significance of that? Now, this fossil man was discovered in the year 1997 by a man named Tim White in the regions of the Afar Triangle, Ethiopia. In these regions, Herto man was busy producing many stone tools which fit characteristically with those created during the Middle Stone Age period, which began around 280,000 years ago and ended approximately 25,000 years ago. Tools like hippos and cattle and bison and water buffaloes. Okay, Herto man. These are the kind of tools that we were looking at. Very sharp, very jagged tools that you would just bounce an animal over its head with, and hopefully you come out on top, you know. Right now, everyone's laughing with their Rugers and their scopes. Can we imagine having a rock like this and trying to take down a bison? We have it easy. This is the region of the Afar Triangle, near Djibouti, near Somalia, what is the biblical Punt, as well as near Ethiopia. And these are the regions where our first anatomically modern man, Herto man, Homo sapien idaltu, was found. Obsession with the stars, the Adam's calendar. With the dawn of the Homo sapiens well underway, many would assume that we would start noticing distinct traces, signs, and symbols of these early modern humans. Well, they would be absolutely correct. As previously mentioned, from the birth and development of humanity, our ancestors began migrating out of the heart of Africa southwards, westwards, as well as northwards, which brings us to our next point. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the origin of our obsession with the stars. Most people would be surprised to learn that the cosmological observation is deeply rooted in the history of South Africa. There are various star tribes in Africa who carry ancient knowledge of the star of Orion. The ancient stone structures known today as the Adam's calendar shows that these ancient men were in touch with stars, as well as the 26,000-year precessional wobble of the planet long before anyone else on this planet. After various stages of calculations, the Adam's calendar has been verified to be well over 160,000 years old. Side note, the first ever statue of Horus was found in South Africa, as well as and that is dated to over 200,000 years ago. Now, the area of South Africa that this megalithic structure and monolithic structure is found is on pretty much the coast of South Africa, and it is on a piece of land known as the Transvaal Escarpment, I believe. And fun fact, there once again information taken from Booker T. Coleman, is that on the coast of South Africa there exists what is known as the Benguela Current. Now, the Benguela Current is significant because if any somewhat understanding navigator of the seas threw a raft in the ocean, the Benguela Current is going to carry you directly up to West Africa, and that Canary Current is going to take you directly into, across the Atlantic, and you will end up directly in the Gulf of Mexico. So not only could you end up in Mexico, like the Olmecs did off the west coast of Africa, but you can also end up in the New World by charting the waterways of the Benguela Current. Now, all of the calendar stones are dolerite, while the bedrock is black reef quartzite. Fun fact, dolerite is one of the hardest stones on the planet. It is a 9 out of 10 on the hardness scale, and it's practically like trying to carve a diamond. But they did it, and they did a good job. Adam's calendar is located at the edge of what is known as the Transvaal Escarpment, as mentioned, and the structure is aligned perfectly to the rise of Orion's belt. The stone structure is approximately 160,000 years old, and the only location on Earth which aligns with the Sumerian mythology regarding Enki building himself a special place of observation in South Africa. Fun fact, when you read, do I have it here? Yes. When you read the Enuma Elish and the Atrahasis, which is the Babylonian flood myth from Sumer, you learn that, it was in the land of Apsu, or South Africa, that a lot of significant works occurred. We'll talk later on about how we have 50,000-year-old mines, and in these ancient texts, the indigenous Africans were said to have been tasked with toiling the mines of the deep Apsu in South Africa. Okay? Pieces of information that are interesting. Now it gets good. The South African origin of the Egyptian symbolism. Now, I know right now it looks like a piece of rock, but the Egyptologists say that this is actually a very, very ancient carving of the Egyptian Netcher, or the Kemetic Netcher, known as Heru, or Horus of the Greeks, and it is over 200,000 years old. So although many modern-day Egyptologists suggest that the high culture of Egypt has nothing to do with the African Bushmen and Hottentots, it should be noted that the oldest model of the Netcher, known as Heru, was carved out of dolerite stone in South Africa over 200,000 years ago. So are we to believe that the current inhabitants of the Middle East and Egypt are also responsible for the artwork found in the furthest regions of South Africa? These are questions that I believe are worth posing. These are the discussions that I want to be able to have. This is very valuable information. Moving on. The Worm Ice Age and the 51st parallel north. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in order to fully understand and bridge the gap between our archaic fossil men, ancestors, and the high culture that we would become known as the Nile Valley civilization, there is a need to spend a moment discussing the significance of the 4 glacial epochs and examine what they mean when it comes to the next few processes of racial differentiation on our planet. By studying the works of Ivan van Sertima and Cheikh Anta Diop, we learned that as a planet, we have already gone through 4 major ice ages. The first being the Gunz Ice Age, the second being the Mindel Ice Age, third being the Riss Ice Age, and fourth being the Worm Ice Age, or as Ivan van Sertima used to say, the Wormian Ice Age, or interstadial. So the 51st parallel is right up there. We're going to talk about that more. It cuts Europe right across. The 51st parallel south is cutting South America across. Now, I am no expert in the field, so I'm not going to make an attempt at pinpointing when exactly each interstadial period of glaciation took place. Interstadial meaning a rapid cooling and a rapid heating. Pinpoint when they took place. But what I can say is that for the sake of building on this thesis, we will only be focusing on the last of the 4 glacial epochs, being the Wormiation glacial period. We focus on this ice age in particular because the human family had not migrated far enough into the northern hemisphere yet to have experienced the other 3 interstadial periods. We learned in Sheikh Anta Diop's African Origin of Civilization that until the 4th glacial epochs, only flat-nosed Negroids were the only humans on this planet. I'm going to say that again. Until the 4th glacial epoch, flat-nosed Negroids, diminutive Africoids were the only humans on this planet. A South African scientist has recently declared our most ancient modern human was indeed black and strongly pigmented according to the evidence at his disposal. It was probably not until the 4th glaciation period, which lasted approximately 100,000 years, that the differentiation of the Negroid race into the other distinct races occurred, following a long period of adaptation by the isolation and imprisonment of the ice, which caused the narrowing of the nostrils, depigmentation of the skin, and of the pupils of the eyes. One specific gene that is responsible for the alteration of these kind of characteristics is known as the OCA2 gene. The OCA2 gene. This information was taken out of Sheikh Anta Diop's African Origins of Civilization, page 68. A profound piece of scholarly literature I encourage everyone to tap in with. Moving on. Boom. What is this? No. Yeah. Okay. Edward G. Conklin, The Evolution of Man. As we look at some of the works produced on the subject matter by some of the world's most qualified thinkers on the topic, such as the late American biologist Edward G. Conklin, we find that the data brought forth in his works known as The Evolution of Man also suggests that it is evident that the distinct races could not have been established and perpetuated except by the aid of an extended isolation, chiefly geographical. Okay? Now, Edward G. Conklin was educated at Johns Hopkins University. He was a professor of biology at Ohio University. He was a professor of zoology at Northwestern University, as well as the University of Pennsylvania and Princeton. And he's a former president of the American Association of the Advancement of Science in 1936. This individual was also awarded the John G. Carter Award from the National Academy of Sciences in 1943. You can tell by his mustache, his glasses, and his straight face that this guy is not playing. The zone of glaciation, the ice wall. Now this is very interesting. I want you all to follow along with me here. In Sheikh Anta Diop's last great literary contribution to the world, known as the Civilization or Barbarism, we learn how in the midst of the global migrations, our human family ventured northward, unknowingly crossing over the 51st parallel, which divides the regions of like Ireland in half, England in half, and crosses over Germany, Holland, and effectively cuts straight through Asia. So that's what we're seeing here. You have to picture an ice wall practically 1 mile thick, cutting right through. And people that are unbeknownst to what's happening is just walking along, boom, you're a family, you're not seeing it. So there's a term, I think there's a term where when we have a lack of vitamin D, and we go through those dark, wintry months like we are right now, and there's no sun, we get vexed, we're miserable, and now people are irritable. Can you imagine 100,000 years with no sun? How vexed would you be? What is the significance of that? It is with this kind of a view that you can start seeing the matters of this nature with more of an empathetic viewpoint. Nobody asked for this. This is just what happened. These are not my opinions. This is history. All right, and crosses over Germany, Holland, cuts with Asia. When the interstadial period of the worm glaciation began, everybody who was north of that parallel would have immediately been locked and trapped by something to the effect of a massive ice wall, in some regions over a mile thick. And just like that, the direction and development of humanity would take a drastic turn for the foreseeable future. Now, as you see here in these points, it divides the regions of England in half, as I mentioned. The Wormian glaciation, or the worm interstadial, is the youngest of the glacial epochs. It began approximately 15,000 years ago, and geologists find very strong climatic fluctuations occurring from the regions of Greenland and traveling across the world. So you have to picture a large blast of energy in the form of an ice wall being birthed from the regions of Greenland in the northwest equatorial areas of the world, and continuing traveling and going across the whole world. There, right across Europe. There is a mountain range, I don't quite remember the name of it, but if you look at that mountain range, it effectively cuts Europe in half. This is the area of the ice wall. Now, as I mentioned in the Peters projection world map, this map was made by Arnold Peters in, I believe, 1974, and it actually shows the continents, land masses, and countries in their accurate landmass scale as it relates to their square mass and mileage. Now, a lot of times, we know what ends up happening is the regions of the northern hemisphere are drastically expanded, and Russia is massive all of a sudden, Canada is massive, but in all actuality, that's not necessarily the case. Greenland is very small and very petite in comparison to places like Australia and the mother continent of Africa or Alkebulan. South America is extraordinarily massive. So a lot of times we are comfortable just looking at I forget the name of the modern day map, but unbeknownst to us, that is not the most spatially accurate map. What we are looking at here is what is known as the Peters projection world map made in 1974, which shows the accurate spatial perspective of the world. Chehuti, Thoth, and the land of Kem. Buckle up, it's about to get interesting. Rise of the Homo sapiens and the Tehuti narrative. Until the proliferation or the rapid expansion of our species some 50,000 years ago, Homo sapien idaltu and Homo sapien neanderthalensis were the primary inhabitants of the earth. Then, once again, something drastic occurred which appears to have sparked a rapid growth in the cognitive ability of our human ancestors. Interestingly enough, when we study the work of Billy Carson and the Emerald Tablets of Creation, which I was so kind to bring today. I saw a few of you picking this book up. Anyone who doesn't know about Billy Carson, I suggest you look into this book. It is off the chain. All right, now when you study the work of Billy Carson, the Emerald Tablets of Creation, we find that 50,000 years ago is exactly when the first interactions between Tehuti and the inhabitants of the land of Kem occurred. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the narrative, it goes a little something like this. It is written that Tehuti ruled over the land of Kem for a period of 16,000 years, from 50,000 before the Common Era to 32,000 before the Common Era. This ruling occurred after the Great Deluge, or the Flood, which devoured Earth's ancient civilizations. Tehuti was appointed the task of leading the development of a new civilization of high culture, which began in the regions of the land of Kem, Upper Egypt. Much of the history regarding the development of civilization into one which can be regarded as the advanced high culture that was documented in the Emerald Tablets of Creation, which was discovered in what was known as the Halls of Amenti, which was under the Great Pyramid of Giza. The written testimony of Herodotus provides us a unique description of this ancient labyrinth in Book 2 of the Histories by Herodotus. And that book is right here. So this is coming from the father of history. Once again, this is not coming from the Hotep brothers in Harlem. This is coming now from the father of history. So before we read his testimony, what do? Do we throw it out because of cognitive dissonance and we say that's ludicrous, I don't want to hear it? Or do we lend an open ear and get comfortable getting uncomfortable? Okay? So in this book, nope, not yet. In this book, we learn that Herodotus documents, as somebody who has seen it with their own eyes, certainly there can be no doubting that the labyrinth would have cost more in terms of sweat and gold than all of the walls and public monuments built and the Greeks put together. Even the pyramids come second to the labyrinth, the Halls of Amenti. It was a 12-roofed courtyard, each one with a gateway, 6 of which are set in a straight line along the north side, and 6 of which directly mirror them along with the south side. The building itself consists of 2 stories, 1 underground and 1 raised over it, each level containing 1,500 rooms, making a total of 3,000 rooms in all. Now, because I went on a tour through the ground level rooms, I saw them all for myself. This is coming from the father of history, folks. So once again, the Neter Tehuti was portrayed with an ibis head and represented divine articulation of speech and intelligence. He was the creator of science, writing, and medicine, and he is known to the Greeks as Thoth and Hermes. The Romans identify him with Mercury. He is known throughout Mesoamerica as Quetzalcoatl, as well as Kukulkan. He ruled over the land of Kem between 50,000 and 36,000 before the Common Era, and we are looking at the author of the Emerald Tablets of Creation. Real quick, I am not suggesting that this individual, this son of man, was walking around with the literal head of the ibis bird. When we are looking at the culture of the Kemeteu, we have to understand the difference between symbolic and symptomatic thought. This is a representation representing what the ibis bird means. Now, for those of you who are familiar with the ibis bird and its nature, the ibis bird was known to burrow its head deep underground in order to find its food and pull the food out from underground. This is the action of bringing what's in the darkness to light. And so for that reason, our ancestors of the Nile Valley, Upper Egypt, and the Kemeteu represented this son of man with the head of the ibis bird. So don't get it twisted. We're not talking about birdmen here. Hotep. Now, long dwelt we in the land of Kem, tablet 1. As we begin to read the contents of the emerald tablets, a very clear picture begins to be painted regarding the nature of the first interactions between Tehuti and the then barbarous inhabitants of the land of Kem, and the lengthy process of a people being raised into the light of wisdom. Into the light of wisdom. Light of wisdom. My apologies, everyone lost my place. Light of wisdom and higher forms of consciousness. Upon the examination of tablet 1, we read, long dwelt we in the land of Kem, long and yet long again, until obeying the commands of my master, who while sleeping yet lives eternally. Up grew into the light of knowledge the children of Kem, watered by the rains of my wisdom. Blasted I then a path to Amenti, so that I might retain my powers. Living from age to age, a son of Atlantis, keeping the wisdom, preserving the records. Great grew the sons of Kem, conquering the people around them. Now for a time I go from among them into the dark halls of Amenti, deep into the halls of earth, before the lords of the powers, face to face once again with the dweller. Raised I high over the entrance, a doorway, a gateway leading down into Amenti. Raised over the passage I, a mighty pyramid using the power that overcomes the earth. This is coming out of page 47 to 49 of the Compendium of the Emerald Tablets. Now, in these passages, we've learned that Tehuti lived amongst the ancient inhabitants of the land of Kem for an extended amount of time, raising them up in soul force and watering them with the rains of his wisdom, until apparently blasted a deep hole under the earth and preserved himself inside the great underground labyrinth known as the Halls of Amenti. Before he erected the Great Pyramid of Giza above the structure to house and protect the Emerald Tablets of Creation. As Billy Carson says, very interesting indeed. So real quick, I'll put it on the record. Most Egyptologists and almost all Egyptologists/Egyptologists will tell you that the pyramids were built during the reign of Khufu, during the Pyramid Age of around the second millennium before the Common Era. I submit that that is historically inaccurate, and I submit that these pyramids, and the pyramid of Khufu, quote unquote, and the pyramids of Giza and the Giza Plateau were actually built by this son of Atlantis, son of man, the individual known as Tehuti, and the pyramids are actually dated a lot closer to 36,000 years before the Common Era, not 2,000 years before the Common Era. Anyone finds any contradictory information, I welcome you to have a conversation. Moving on, so over here you see that the tablets of creation were translated by an individual by the name of Maurice Doriel in 1925. There are a total of 15 tablets, and you're looking at a representation of one of them. Now they exist this is interesting, folks. They exist in a state that is unalterable, undamaged, and unchanged. In this regard, they refute the laws of ionization. This underground labyrinth, which housed the emerald tablets, were documented in Book 2 of the Histories of Herodotus, which we just read from. All right, now this is a depiction out of the Compendium of the Emerald Tablets of the underground labyrinth that was discussed in the Histories of Herodotus, which was known in the ancient times as the Halls of Amenti. These halls, like it or not, these halls have been found. People have gone through them. We may not know, we may not have the kind of money to get access to this kind of information, but we have it now. This information was not only documented and spoken about by our Hotep brothers, but it was also documented in the histories of Herodotus, Book 2, Section 148. Long dwelt we in the land of Kem. As we begin to read the contents of the Emerald Tablets, a very clear picture begins to be painted regarding the nature of the first interactions between Tehuti and the then barbarous inhabitants of the land of Kem, and lengthy process of people being raised into the light of wisdom and higher forms of consciousness. Upon examination of the, my apologies, birth of high culture, civilization, my apologies, lost my place. Yes, here we go. The birth of high culture and the minds of Swaziland. Oh, before we move forward, I just want to give you the illustration here. So right here we see, as we mentioned, I blasted a channel into the heart of the earth. Now, when you look at the Great Pyramid, I want you to understand something. These channels are carved into the pyramid at such a precise angle that they give you a direct sight into the light of the Grand Orion. They let you see the pole star of the Sut over there. So all of these channels are not just fancy for or arrangement. They are meant specifically to observe the cosmic surroundings and to be able to have a profound understanding of where we are in relation to the cosmos. And then here we go. Path of grand horizon of heaven, descent into immortality. What does that mean? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me. All right, this illustration is coming out of Science and Symbols of Primordial Man, Albert Churchward. Now, fun fact, in the Bible you will read that Yeshua the Christ, also known as Jesus the Christ, identifies himself as the Son of Man. Fun fact, so does Tehuti, but that was happening 30,000 years prior. Yeshua the Christ also identifies himself as the Prince of Peace. Fun fact, so does Yemhotep. That was over 2,000 years prior. So these are just pieces of information that I feel that are significant and should be shared. Now, one piece of information before we move forward. Tehuti was the one who erected the Great Pyramid of Giza above the Great Labyrinth with the force of Earth. Now, could that be cymatic frequency? I don't know. Now, in the study of cymatic frequency, you understand how certain harmonized and channeled resonance of sound waves have actually been proven to move matter. And these ancient Kemet were known to be able to manifest and move matter through the manipulation of intentional sound waves. Interesting stuff, folks. Look it up. Introduction into High Culture, A Quest for Gold. Well, that was a pretty intriguing story, to say the least. Far-fetched? Yes, maybe. But so is the fact that the curvature designed into the face of the Great Pyramid exactly matches the radius of the Earth. Take it with a grain of salt, ladies and gentlemen, and make of it what you choose. But what I can assure you is that these are, once again, not my opinions. This is history. Okay? Now that modern man has been raised to a heightened state of consciousness, what's the first thing that we found ourselves up to? Mining for gold and resources, of course. What else? On that note, we will segue into the final topic of the segment, which brings us into the introduction of the ancient gold mines of Swaziland, gold and iron mines of Swaziland. An article published in the New York Times on February 8, 1970, spoke of how South African archaeologists discovered the world's oldest mines. The mine in an iron ore mountain in neighboring Swaziland is a staggering 43,000 years old, according to radiocarbon dating. A man by the name of Adrian Boshier discovered caverns at the Bambu Ridge in the Ngwenya mountain range in Swaziland. During the mining, so that ancient tools were found that the news reached archaeologist Professor Raymond Dart in South Africa. Dart sent a knowledgeable colleague to investigate these stone tools made of dolerite. These chopper picks and hammerstones were not just on the surface, but also deep underground. It seems that these early miners removed at least 1,200 tons of soft hematite ore, rich in specularite, from one particular mine in the Lion Cavern alone. So here we see, once again, February 8th, 1970, in the New York Times, ladies and gentlemen, 43,000-year-old mine discovered in Swaziland. Now, in South Africa, it shows that more than 43,000 years ago, Africans were mining in Swaziland. Now, fun fact, if you Google right now, how long have Africans been mining? They'll tell you, yeah, for the past 2,000 years, rubbish. I toss it away. With this information, I immediately dispel any and all notions that the beginning of mining for our ancestors was a merely crummy 2,000 years ago. 40,000 years ago, we were underground getting those resources. Now, the Sumerian tablets tell us that the ancient people, as I mentioned, were mining all kinds of minerals many thousand years ago. Now, the richest gold mine in the world today, the Sheba gold mine, is located just a few miles away from the Adams Calendar in South Africa, where, as I mentioned, they were tasked with mining, toiling the mines of Apsu. Here is the Negwenya mountain range. It's kind of dark, but that is where all this information is, all this activity is taking place. So once again, the Adams Calendar was about the Transvaal Escarpment. The Benguela Current will take you right up there. The first fossil men came from Tanzania and migrated southwards, and all of a sudden we're mining for gold. This is the birth and development of humanity, people, and this is our cultural history. This is a reclamation of history. All right, and here's the official article out of New York Times. I took the liberty of subscribing to the New York Times. So throughout this lecture, I will be giving you screenshots. This is, once again, this is not my opinion. This is history. At that point in time, we were talking about Valentine's, and these are the fine ladies of the 1970s. So yeah, big up to them. This is an aerial image of one of those mines. As you can see here, we're looking at that right there. Imagine flying over and seeing a massive hole in the ground. What was happening? People were in the earth looking for the gold. It's not a coincidence that we're out here and we like to drip. It's not a coincidence that we value gold. Over 40,000 years ago, we were mining for it. Okay? Here we go, out of a piece of literature known as the Temples of the African Gods, which discusses all kinds of things like the Great Zimbabwe, like the Sphinx of South Africa, like Heru over 200,000 years ago, like the 40,000-year-old mines of Swaziland. It's coming out of this book, Temples of the African Gods, revealing the ancient hidden ruins of South Africa. As you can see, they know what's going on. They're over there taking pictures of the rocks. They're taking pictures of it, they're documenting it, but we don't know about it. This is a problem, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that our children should have the benefit of knowing that over 40,000 years prior to the suggested date of creation, our ancestors were busy mining gold, getting to it. And those are some of the stone tools over there, some of the stone tools used, okay? Closing statements. So there we have it. My best attempt at compressing over 2 million years of history into 50 slides and an hour's worth of presentation. We have followed the historical record from the Australopithecines into the proliferation of our species and early astrologers charting the stars, agriculturists and miners of our era. It's my hope that I've been able to share this information with you that will effectively challenge the existing narratives that we are taught about the birth and development of humanity. I have intentionally left things off where we can pick up after intermission and begin to take a look at the global migrations of our ancestors from all across the globe. And that, my friends, concludes our first segment of this lecture.
Thanks a lot. Maxwell, right? You like to go. Yeah, so we're gonna go into the first, we're at the end of the first segment, obviously. So this is the first question and answer period. So I'm going to start here. Okay. Okay, so obviously I'll ask you the first two. Then.
You can ask, you can pose it to the audience.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I hope you guys are all attentive here. Okay. So I'll ask you guys the first question. So how does this new understanding of this first segment we've covered, how does it reshape your understanding of our place in the world? Okay. Like our place, you know?
We have an answer right here.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Say that again?
It's not just thousands of years, it's millions of years.
All right. All right. Okay.
Indeed.
And anybody else want to add to that?
That our history is not confined to what people who try to write over our history is. Our history is not limited to what our oppressors have said it is. So we don't have to limit our scholarship by theirs. We can do our own.
Okay. Very good comment, very good comment. Any more comments here from the audience?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that their version of history is not our reality of history. And until we dig up the information and present it, it doesn't exist. So the presentation today was brilliant in terms of the amount of research and referencing and the reality of it. Like, it makes sense, but you have to question the historian's reason for excluding this history. And I can almost answer that question because it does not benefit them. So if it's going to benefit us, who's going to do the heavy lifting? Who's going to do the heavy research? Who's going to make it presentable, right?
Yes.
Is it them or is it going to be us? So this shows that it can be done, but are we ready to do the heavy lifting? Because if we don't, our children are going to be denied that generational knowledge that is important for them, for their own identity and purpose in life.
Very well said.
Very well said.
Very well said.
Very well said, yes. And just to add to that, I would say this understanding this, as you know, has helped enhance my self-pride and knowing that we have a rich history, and we truly are kings and queens, And the next question here is, so how do you think the acquisition of this information can be beneficial towards our community? I'd like to see a female take us. Okay.
It gives us a motivation to take our own stand, take our own charge, create our own things. Like you were saying about FUBU earlier.
Right.
So for us, by us, and our own documented history for us and by us, our own schools, our own stuff. This is what that inspired.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yes. Very good comment.
I mean, the other big thing is basically the mental health situation too, right? I mean, one of the things that you hear often is people lament and say, we've always been oppressed. But it's a small, I mean, if your history did not begin with slavery, when you look from 155,000 years ago, the period of slavery, max, and of that we know of, is 11,000 years. So for the majority of the time, we wanted to sleep.
Yeah.
So then, if you have people always lamenting that these things don't go right, it's because we've always been oppressed. That's a mental health situation. You will never feel good about yourself because you don't know your history. So once you get into stress periods and you see yourself only 2,000, 3,000 years of existence, then it's going to have an obvious impact on you. It's going to, since we know that stress goes in your DNA and can
Write it down, and someone needs to know it. It's because I'm reading about Queen Candace, I'm reading about the Hyksos, I'm like, what is going on? And what I can say is that ever since then, I find that, I see myself as the individual who has a very strong commitment, a commitment that's often bigger than I am. What I do is not for money. I'm not really even tracking if I'm making it. I don't care if I make money from this event. What my success is waged in and what I scale my success in is the value that I contribute back to the community. Because there's a very famous quote that I document famous quotes that resonate with me. There's a very famous quote by Runoko Rashidi, and it speaks to my heart. That's why I do this. That quote reads, "The past is not dead, and history is not finished. What you do for yourself depends on what you think of yourself. What you think of yourself depends on what you know of yourself. And what you know of yourself depends on what you've been told of yourself." Deep. So where I stand is a place where like our community is not being told anything positive of themselves. So I feel it is my civic duty to do everything in my power to contribute back to the world in a way where I can change that. And I'm gonna continue to be able to do that. I'm not gonna lie, like, I don't have a campaign behind me. I don't necessarily have a plan. This may be the first, something is maybe the last. I know that I'm willing, I know that I'm prepared, I know that I'm prepared to stand up and take the criticism. I'm prepared to stand up and be ridiculed and be portrayed as somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about, because it's worth it and because it's necessary, and because I'm not under the impression that we have another 5-10 years of existing like this where we can just continue in this area of dogma and propaganda about who we are, where we come from, and our value to this world. So I'd love to take it to the University of Toronto. I'd love to pop up on CP24. I'd love to start a book club. I'd love to do a lot of things. I'm not necessarily aware of where to start, but I started here. And what I can say is that if any opportunity presents itself to speak in a small library or in a scholarly academic facility like U of T, I will be there. I will have my Pan-African library, I'll have my timeline, and I will have courage. And I am willing to stand in front of whomever necessary to reclaim this history and to fulfill my duty as a Pan-African. So yes, I'm ready and I intend to move forward. Good.
Congrats, Jayden, for the work that you're doing. But the other critical thing I think for any community, its question is, are we willing to sponsor?
To me, I'm not necessarily too hung up on whether or not he's a Caucasian or not, because he just so happens to be a medium in which information is brought forth. Now, information and education, I find to a certain degree is unbiased, and I try to maintain as much of an unbiased perspective as possible. So, as I mentioned, this is a freestyle, and I appreciate you for your constructive criticism and your ability to allow me to be able to be more precise, concise, or clear with what I'm portraying. But to answer your question simply, you're looking at one of the most significant individuals who ended up bringing forth these ancient fossil men to to the worldview.
I appreciate your clarity in that and your honesty, and I would encourage you, sir, to dig even deeper. You're a young man, and I know you're seeking the truth. I still think you should dig deeper, because
Individual having more access to genomes and telomeres and all that, and I get that, but being that I really have a deep reverence and admiration to the scholar Booker T. Coleman, who has been in the system of education for over 30 years. He stays strictly in education, and I do my utmost best to steer out of sharing information and notions that are not like progressive. I could stay here and talk about rehusis genes and that, but that's not really what I'm here to do. I'm here to just share contextualized information, unbiased information, and allow the people to do with it as they will. So I welcome your constructive criticism, and I take it on very powerfully. And I look forward to hearing what you have to say after the next segment, when we discuss the Nile Valley cultures, or the Nile Valley high culture of civilization in the land of Somalia and Punt and Kush and Ethiopia, because it's coming up.
That it's a reminder, it's a reminder, it's a reminder, it's a reminder. Universal morality is what is at stake. It's a reminder. His Majesty talk out for humanity's sake, and it's a reminder.